Evelyn Turner stared at her reflection in the hallway mirror, fixing her hair for the 5th time. Her husband Mark was in the living room, scrolling through his phone, half listening as she asked if he liked her dress. He said yes without looking up. It was a small moment, but it stung. Lately, everything between them had felt like that, polite, distant, and routine. The laughter that once filled their home had turned into silence, broken only by the sound of his late-night typing. Evelyn tried not to take it personally, but deep down she felt invisible. That night they were going to dinner at their friend's house, Liam and Claire. They had known them for years, ever since all four met through work events and mutual gatherings. Liam and Claire were the kind of couple who made everything feel light. Evelyn always admired how easily they talked, how they teased each other with warmth instead of irritation. As she watched Mark drive, his eyes fixed on the road, she wondered when they'd lost that spark. When they arrived, the evening started effortlessly. The house smelled like baked bread and rosemary. Claire opened the door with her usual bright smile, and Liam followed, greeting them with that calm confidence that made everyone feel at ease. The music was soft, the lighting warm, and for the first time in weeks, Evelyn felt relaxed. Dinner was full of laughter and easy conversation. They talked about old trips, upcoming plans, and the little frustrations of life. Liam sat across from Evelyn, and she noticed how attentively he listened when she spoke, not just nodding, but really listening, asking questions, laughing at her dry jokes. Mark was next to Claire, and Evelyn caught glimpses of them sharing small smiles over stories about fitness and work projects. It felt normal, almost comforting. But there was a strange undercurrent in the air, something unspoken that none of them could quite name. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Claire poured wine while Liam played something slow and jazzy on the speaker. The light from the fireplace painted everything in soft gold. Mark sat beside Claire on the couch, talking about hiking trails. Evelyn ended up beside Liam on the other sofa. They were close, not in a way that was wrong, but close enough for her to notice the warmth of his presence. Their conversation drifted from small talk to something more personal. Evelyn mentioned how hard it had been lately, the quiet dinners, the long hours, the feeling of distance. Liam didn't try to fix it. He just listened. His voice was calm when he said, "Sometimes people drift, not because they stop caring, but because they stop noticing." It was such a simple line, yet it hit her harder than she expected. She wondered how he understood so easily. As the evening went on, laughter filled the room again, but the connections had subtly changed. Evelyn could feel it. The way Mark leaned closer to Claire as they looked at photos on her phone. The way Liam's hand brushed hers when he passed her a glass. They both pulled away quickly, pretending it was nothing. But the silence that followed said everything. When it was time to leave, Claire hugged Evelyn tightly, and Liam walked them to the door. It was a normal goodbye, polite smiles, a promise to do this again soon. But Evelyn's heart was racing. As she stepped into the cold air, she looked back once. Liam was still standing at the doorway, watching them drive away, his hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. The ride home was quiet. Mark talked briefly about a meeting he had the next day, and Evelyn responded with short answers. Her mind was still back in that cozy living room, the music, the warmth, the feeling of being seen again. It wasn't attraction exactly, not yet. It was something softer, something she hadn't felt in a long time, attention, understanding. When they reached home, Mark went straight to his study, saying he had some emails to finish. Evelyn nodded, went to the kitchen, and started clearing up the leftovers from earlier. She stood by the counter, staring out the window into the night. It was strange how a single evening could stir so many things inside her. She wasn't unhappy, but she wasn't content either. She loved her husband. She knew that, but love sometimes wasn't enough to fill the silence. Later that night, she got a message from Claire. "So good to see you guys tonight. We should plan that beach trip soon." Evelyn smiled. A few seconds later, another message came in from Liam. "It was nice talking tonight. You seemed different. Hope you're okay." Evelyn stared at the message for a long time. It was friendly, harmless even, but something about it made her heart beat faster. She typed a simple reply. "I'm okay. Thank you for asking." Then she deleted it, retyped it, and finally sent it. It was a small thing, but she felt the shift the moment she hit send. Days passed, but that evening kept replaying in her mind. She tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself it was nothing more than friendly warmth. But every now and then, her phone would buzz a new message from Liam. A simple check-in, a photo, a joke. They didn't say anything wrong, yet every exchange carried a quiet tension neither dared to name. Meanwhile, Mark seemed happier too. He smiled more, even joked at breakfast. He started going to the gym again, something he'd talked about with Claire that night. Evelyn told herself it was just motivation from friends. But a part of her wondered if maybe they were texting too. She didn't ask. She didn't want to know. One evening, as she sat on the couch reading, Mark walked by, phone in hand, smiling faintly. He said he'd be working late again. She nodded, pretending to focus on her book. The front door closed and the house fell silent. The emptiness of the living room felt heavy. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Liam, "Can't sleep." "You?" She looked at it for a long time. Her heart told her this was dangerous, that lines were blurring, but another part of her, the lonely part, just wanted someone to talk to, someone who cared enough to ask. She typed back, "No, I can't either." That night they talked for hours about nothing and everything. Childhood dreams, music, the fear of growing apart from the people you love. It felt easy. It felt right. And yet, somewhere deep down, Evelyn knew it wasn't. By the time the sun started rising, she realized she hadn't felt this alive in years. It scared her. It excited her. It confused her. And when she finally put her phone down and closed her eyes, one thought echoed in her mind, a thought she wasn't ready to face yet. That night at dinner had changed everything, and neither of them had seen it coming. They hadn't planned it. They hadn't wanted it. But when they switched without warning, a door had quietly opened, and neither of them had said no. Days turned into weeks after that dinner, but the memory of it never faded. Evelyn found herself thinking about Liam more often than she wanted to admit. It wasn't just attraction, it was comfort, the kind she'd been missing at home. Every few days, a message would appear on her phone from him. Sometimes it was just a photo of his coffee or a song he said reminded him of their last conversation. Other times it was a quiet question. "How are you really doing?" Those small words made her heart pause every time. Mark, on the other hand, seemed lighter too. He started smiling again, coming home in better moods, humming to himself while making coffee in the morning. Evelyn wanted to believe it was because their marriage was improving, but deep down, she sensed something else. She noticed how he checked his phone with a half smile, or how he mentioned Claire more often, her new fitness routine, her recent promotion, her funny texts. Evelyn didn't ask questions. She wasn't sure she wanted to know the answers. One Friday evening, Mark told her he would be working late again. His tone was casual, too casual, and Evelyn simply nodded. She had stopped arguing about it weeks ago. As she watched him leave, a strange quiet filled the house. She stood by the window, staring at the streetlights flickering on, when her phone buzzed. It was Liam. "Claire's out tonight. I don't feel like being alone. Want some company?" Her heart raced. For a moment, she thought of saying no. But the silence in the house felt unbearable, the kind of silence that made every wall echo with loneliness. Without overthinking, she replied, "Sure, why not?" Liam arrived with takeout and that familiar, calm smile. "I brought dinner," he said, holding up the bags like it was the most natural thing in the world. They sat together at the kitchen counter, eating straight from the containers, laughing about how burnt the food looked. It was simple, easy, like old friends catching up. They talked for hours. He told her about his childhood, his love for drawing, his fear that his marriage had turned into a routine of smiles without feeling. Evelyn shared her own worries, how she still loved Mark, but felt like a stranger in her own home. Their words were honest but gentle, never blaming, trying to understand what had gone wrong. At one point, a quiet moment fell between them. The room felt still, and Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat. Liam's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you ever feel like you're with the right person? But at the wrong time?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She met his eyes, and in that instant, she saw her own sadness reflected in them, to people trying to stay faithful to something that no longer felt alive. Neither of them moved closer. They didn't have to. The silence between them said everything words COULDN. Still. Evelyn stood up to clear the plates. But Liam gently took them from her hands. "You've done enough," he said softly. The small kindness made her throat tighten. She didn't know why such simple gestures could feel so overwhelming. Maybe because no one had looked at her like that in so long. Not with desire, but with care. When he finally stood to leave, they walked to the door in silence. The air outside was cool, and the night was quiet. He turned to her and said, "You don't have to feel guilty for needing to be seen." His words hung in the air long after he left. Evelyn closed the door slowly, pressing her hand to her chest. She knew something inside her had shifted, even if nothing physical had happened. The next morning, Mark seemed cheerful. He made breakfast, asked about her plans, and even kissed her cheek before leaving for work. Evelyn smiled faintly, but couldn't ignore how strange it all felt. Both of them were acting normal, but beneath the calm surface, their hearts were moving in opposite directions. Over the next few weeks, the communication between Evelyn and Liam became a routine of its own. Morning messages, short calls, small check-ins. They never said anything inappropriate, yet every conversation felt intimate. Liam knew what to say, when to stay quiet, when to make her laugh. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was connection, the kind that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. Meanwhile, Mark's friendship with Claire seemed to grow as well. Evelyn saw her name on his phone once when he left it on the counter. A part of her wanted to confront him, but another part felt she had no right. She wasn't innocent either. They were both lost in the same storm, just holding on to different lifeboats. One evening, Evelyn met Liam at a small cafe near the waterfront. They sat outside watching the waves crash softly under the fading light. Liam said he had been thinking about leaving Seattle for a while, maybe starting fresh somewhere quiet. Evelyn listened, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. "Maybe that's what you need," she said quietly. He smiled, but his eyes told a different story. When they walked back to their cars, Liam stopped and said, "You deserve to be happy, Evelyn. Don't stay in something that makes you forget who you are." His voice was calm, but there was pain beneath it. She didn't answer. She didn't know how. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed beside Mark, who was already asleep, his phone lighting up every few minutes with new messages. She turned away, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy with questions she couldn't ask. A few days later, Claire invited her over for coffee. They sat on the porch sipping lattes and talking about small things. Work, weather, travel. But Evelyn could sense something underneath Claire's calm tone, something unspoken. At one point, Claire looked at her and said, "Funny how people change, isn't it? One moment everything feels stable, and then something shifts." Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't have to. They both knew what she meant. That evening, Evelyn walked home slowly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't heartbroken. She just felt tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of wondering who started drifting first. When she reached home, Mark was there, smiling, cooking dinner. "I thought we could eat together for once," he said. She smiled back, but it felt forced. Everything felt forced now. Every smile, every kiss, every "I love you." Later, when she sat alone on the balcony, her phone buzzed again. It was Liam. "I miss our talks." She stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Me too." The truth was, they had both crossed a line long before they realized it. Not in action, but in heart. They had switched, not physically, but emotionally, and once that happened, nothing could ever go back to how it was before. Evelyn didn't know where this would lead or how it would end. But for the first time in years, she felt something real, even if it was the wrong kind of real and deep down. She knew the moment it all began, that dinner night had been the turning point. The night when two couples unknowingly exchanged their hearts, they switched without warning, and neither of them had said no. The following months felt like a blur for Evelyn. Days passed normally on the surface, But inside, everything was different. She still went to work, still cooked dinner, still smiled when people talked to her, but her mind lived elsewhere. Every message from Liam carried warmth that she couldn't find at home. Every look from Mark reminded her of how far they'd drifted apart. What had once been love now felt like an old photograph, familiar but faded. She told herself it wasn't an affair. Not really. There had been no promises, no confessions, no betrayal she could point to. Yet every quiet conversation with Liam, every unspoken feeling between them, made her realize that hearts can cross lines long before actions do. Liam had started to pull back a little, though. He said it wasn't fair to anyone, not to her, not to Claire, not to himself. But even in silence, their connection lingered. Some nights when Evelyn couldn't sleep, she would scroll through their old messages, reading them over and over. Not because of the words, but because of the way he made her feel, seen, understood, alive. One evening, Mark came home early. It surprised her. He brought flowers, something he hadn't done in months. "I thought we could have dinner together," he said, his voice calm, maybe too calm. Evelyn smiled, took the flowers, and thanked him. The gesture was sweet, but her heart didn't move the way it used to. They sat at the table, eating in silence, pretending everything was fine. But underneath the quiet, both of them knew it wasn't. After dinner, Mark looked at her and said, "You seem distant lately. Are you okay?" The question was simple, but Evelyn froze. How could she explain a loneliness she didn't understand herself? "Just tired," she said softly. He nodded, though his eyes said he didn't believe her. A few minutes later, he went upstairs, and the house fell into its usual silence. Evelyn sat there for a long time, staring at the untouched wine in her glass. She didn't cry. She just felt empty. A week later, everything changed. A friend invited them both to a birthday dinner, and by coincidence, Liam and Claire were there too. The moment Evelyn walked in and saw them, her chest tightened. Liam looked surprised. Claire smiled politely, and Mark froze for half a second before regaining his usual charm. The four of them sat at the same table, pretending nothing had changed. But every glance, every pause, every forced laugh was filled with tension. Evelyn could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on her. When she looked at Liam, she saw the same sadness mirrored back. At one point, Claire leaned over to pour more wine for Mark, and her hand brushed his. It was quick, small, but Evelyn noticed. So did Liam. Their eyes met for a brief second, and in that silent exchange, they both understood the truth. Neither had wanted to admit they had all been searching for something they'd lost long ago. And they'd found it in the wrong places. The dinner ended quietly. There were smiles, polite goodbyes, promises to meet again soon, but everyone knew that wouldn't happen. Evelyn and Mark drove home without speaking. The city lights flashed past the window like fading memories. When they reached home, Mark parked the car and sat there for a while before saying, "I think we both know something's broken." Evelyn didn't argue. She just nodded. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't try to stop them. "I don't even know when it happened," she whispered. "Neither do I," he said softly. "But maybe pretending isn't helping anyone anymore." That night, for the first time in years, they spoke honestly. No shouting, no blame, just two people facing the truth. They talked about how their lives had drifted apart. How small things piled up into walls neither of them noticed until it was too late. Mark admitted that he'd grown close to Claire, that she'd been someone to talk to when everything at home felt heavy. Evelyn didn't react with anger. She understood because she had done the same with Liam when the conversation ended. Mark simply said, "Maybe we should take some time apart." Evelyn agreed. There was no fight, no bitterness, only quiet understanding that love sometimes changes its shape. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn moved into a small apartment downtown. The first night alone felt strange, the silence both peaceful and painful. She filled her days with work, long walks, and music. She didn't contact Liam. She didn't want to. She needed to find herself again without anyone else's shadow beside her. But one evening, as she sat by the window watching the rain, her phone buzzed. It was a message from him. "I heard about you and Mark. Are you okay?" She stared at the screen for a long time. Part of her wanted to reply, to fall back into the comfort of his words. But another part, the stronger part, knew she couldn't. She deleted the message and put her phone away. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry, not from heartbreak, but from relief. She was finally letting go. Months later, Evelyn met Mark for coffee. They spoke kindly like old friends. He told her he was moving to another city for work. She wished him well. There was no resentment, no leftover pain, just gratitude for what they once had. Before leaving, he smiled and said, "You look happier." "I think I finally am," she replied. That night, as she walked home through the quiet streets, Evelyn thought about everything that had happened. The dinners, the messages, the glances that had turned into something deeper. None of it had been planned. None of it had been cruel. They were all just people trying to fill empty spaces, trying to feel something real again. Liam and Claire had stayed together, at least from what she heard. Mark was starting over. And Evelyn, she was learning that sometimes love doesn't end in anger or betrayal. Sometimes it just fades, and in that fading, people find themselves again. She sat by her window, watching the city lights reflect on the glass, and whispered to herself, maybe this was how it was meant to be. She no longer felt guilt, only understanding. What had happened between them wasn't a story of bad people doing wrong things. It was a story of hearts that got lost and tried to find warmth wherever they could. Evelyn would always remember Liam not as a mistake, but as a reminder that she was still capable of feeling, still capable of love, even when everything seemed numb. And though their connection had started in the wrong place, it had taught her something priceless. That real healing begins when you stop searching for someone to complete you and start learning to stand alone. Looking out at the city below, she smiled softly. Life had moved on, and so had she. The pain had faded, replaced by quiet strength. They had switched without warning. She had never said no. But now she understood some stories aren't about right or wrong. They're about growing, forgiving, and finding yourself again. And in that calm silence, Evelyn finally felt at peace.